Welcome, I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County's mayor. As we travel around Williamson County, today we have the distinct honor and pleasure talking with the mayor of Thompsons Station, Tennessee. Thanks for being with us, Corey Napier. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Rogers. How are you?
Thank you for your service. I'll say that up front. I remember myself, I used to have some dark hair, and if I remember correctly, you used to have some dark hair.
At one time he did, maybe a little bit more of it. Both.
In our travels around our county and trying to understand the 6 cities that we have by interviewing each of the county mayors, let's talk about Thompson Station. But before we get to that point, let's talk about Corey. Where'd you start? How'd you get started? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah, well, I was just having this conversation earlier today, and I hear this term unicorn. So I'm native Nashvilleian, believe it or not, born and raised on Granny White Pike over next to Lipscomb, and after attending public schools and going to David Lipscomb High School.
Got to get it down straight.
Yeah, I ended up going over to UT Knoxville, and then after graduation, came back to Nashville and started a career in banking.
Excuse me.
I didn't know this was so profound, Rogers.
Yeah, you cracked me up. I apologize for that.
So I'm one of these folks that's outside of a little time in Florida, has spent his whole life in Middle Tennessee. Ended up doing graduate work at Vanderbilt and getting my MBA, and about 20 years ago found myself looking to get out of Nashville and find the greener pastures, if you will. And I had spent a lot of time in Williamson County as a kid growing up, fishing and just hanging out with friends, and I always loved this area. So when my wife and I lost the battle about where to live, and she said we're going to go do the farm thing, we settled on Thompson Station, not really appreciating perhaps how exponential the growth would become for our part of the world, and but we've been very blessed to live on a small farm and raise our kids and have this balance of best of both worlds, where you have all these nice amenities, wonderful amenities, but you have the chance to be in nature and the kids to kind of rip and snort and run around the place and eat dirt and that sort of thing. So.
Thompson Station, in the scheme of things, such as Franklin, which has a 200-year history, Thompson Station doesn't have that.
We don't, as far as an incorporation. We incorporated in 1990, and that was really an interesting time for the community, which at that time was learning that 840 was going to come smack through the middle of Thompson Station, if you will, that part of the world. And Spring Hill was starting to see some of its growth, and Saturn Plant had come, and if you will, concerned citizens and residents got together and said, hey, we want to stand for a more rural lifestyle. We'd like to control our growth and keep this legacy of the agricultural community, understanding that 840 is going to happen. It's going to open, and it's going to be a game changer, and so forth. And this is pre-Williamson County really starting to explode with the population move. And so, to their credit, they galvanized a bunch of folks and asked the state for a charter. And in August of 1990, we achieved our town incorporation. But the history of Thompson Station goes way back.
Sure.
Before that. I mean, if we want to go back to prehistoric days and the Indians and those that came before, Thompson Station was settled, I guess, by, if you will, the Scots-Irish clans that were coming through this area in the late 1700s, and so with some large land grants. The town was actually known as White House, and then was known as Littleberry before becoming Thompson Station, and that was due to a large land donation, which is now our downtown little area. Dr. Elijah Thompson and his family gave some land to the citizens, really, as a public use, and that became then we turned the name into Thompson Station, and it's been that ever since.
Prior to going on the air, I didn't know exactly what number of mayor you have been, but you're number 4
Right?
with a population today of approximately,
Let's call it a little over 5,000.
and in 29 years, a lot has changed in Thompson Station or White House or any of the other names prior to it. And what caused Corey Napier to get engaged and say, I want to be a part of this when you and your wife and your young family came here several years ago? The life of a mayor or an alderman or a council member, as Jimmy Alexander, the mayor of Nolensville, recently said, it's not always a life of paved roads.
Right.
It's ups and downs. There's a lot of bumps, and maintaining what was originally put in place, but at the same time realizing you have to provide services to your citizens inside the city. That's a tough balance, Corey.
Yeah, it really is. And, for a town like ours, we're blessed with some major infrastructure assets. I-65, 840, Highway 431, State Highway 31. All those roads come through Thompson Station. It's an abundance of riches when you think about it from the standpoint of a road network. But there's things that we haven't had. We didn't have a sewer system, even 15 years ago. And we had county roads that, by certain standards today, need to be addressed and upgraded, because it's less of an agricultural community, and it's now a lot of heavy traffic coming with the population increases. And so it has been this balancing act. To your question, why did I get involved? I tell people I got involved for selfish reasons. You might have put me in the category of a not in your backyarder, a NIMBY. So we'd moved out to Green Acres and Thompson Station, and a little breathing there, a little elbow room, and then suddenly we heard that a very large senior retirement community was being proposed right next door to our place. And so some neighbors and I were horrified by that thought, and so we all banded together, and I guess I ran my mouth more at a meeting than most. Everybody else stood back and said, why don't you run for office? And so one thing led to another. And so I was, lo and behold, I got elected. And then once you settle in, and you well know this, obviously with your years of service, it's bigger than you. And you start to appreciate the nuances to what it takes to run a community and to build a community and to galvanize other folks in your community to get involved and help out. And we're such a small town, we don't have large departments that you'd find in other municipalities. So you find yourself calling up folks and saying, hey, you got a background in engineering, you got a background in architecture, you got a background in road construction or whatever it is. And you ask folks like that, can you contribute your time and talents to help grow a city? And so I've been blessed in my years as mayor to be surrounded by wonderful folks that have said, let me know how to help. And so, our biggest opportunities really continue to be engaging folks that are moving to the community, saying there's a place for you to contribute, a place for you to help out. But let's all understand there's no such thing as a free lunch. And you can't have low taxes and you can't have all these wonderful amenities without volunteering and helping out and figuring out ways to create an economic model as well as a quality of life proposition that encourages the types of things that will help pay the bills in the form of sales tax and otherwise. And so for me, if there's one thing I love about being mayor, and maybe it is for you too, is you meet people from all walks of life. And that's so enriching, in your life. At least it is in my life.
Mayor, you talked about keeping those taxes low. What is your tax rate per hundred?
It's a little over 10 cents, 10.3.
I'm kind of comparing those. There's no way that you can have as you said, the massive departments, and without those volunteers, men and women in the community to step up and help. One of your residents, and if I'm not mistaken, he was the first mayor of Thompsons Station, who is a dear friend and worked many, many years here in the county as our budget director, finance director, was David Coleman. And I actually was talking to David earlier this week. He stopped by. We've got him when he retired from the county. we've asked him to serve on several committees, and I
Right.
know that you've engaged him over the last few months in some opportunities that he can handle. But I look across Thompson Station, and certainly your largest commercial taxpayer, I would think, would be Mars Pet Care. And you were around in those early days, and they decided, they picked that location where they're at now, right off from 840, and I mean, it's a baseball throw off from 840.
Right.
And they've been a wonderful corporate partner for Thompson Station, as well as Williamson County and Franklin. They have a location in Franklin.
That's right.
If you had a crystal ball at about 40,000 feet, 29 years is a very young period of time for a city. What do the next 29 years look like for Thompson Station?
Yeah, yeah. It's this question I get a lot, Rogers, which is where's the town headed, and what's it going to be like? And I'd say I don't know exactly. I think what we have done is to set a table. What the 29 years, blink of the eye, really. But foundationally, we've been working on the bones, if you will, of a town that when it is reaching some level of build out, and I don't know, people ask that all the time, what's build out? I said, I don't know. What if we're doing some higher rise buildings along 840 at some point? Population density, is that the right metric? Is the level of green space the right metric? What are these things that will define our town? And I think where we come back to is with these foundational things, getting a land development ordinance in place. It's won some national and actually global awards as well as a state award, and doing I think a good job of developing, if you will, the town's constitution, which is this code by which we all agree that the values that are important to us, things like night skies and walkability and sense of place and scale, connectivity, both and with the physical environment as well as knowing your neighbors, looking out for each other, and putting density of housing where it makes sense, where the infrastructure is not spread here and yon, and you can minimize, if you will, some of the spend on the infrastructure size. All those things we've been thinking about. So, if we fast forward another 29 years, where we sit at this crossroads of Tennessee, and to a large degree the eastern U.S. with the highway system that comes through Middle Tennessee, and folks flocking here for all the mega trends, high tax states that they don't want to live in any longer, weather, et cetera. We're trying to be pragmatic and say people are going to continue to choose us, and they'll have a choice in Williamson County of a variety of different brands, whether it's the Franklin brand, it's the Nolensville brand, the Thompson Station brand. Our brand, we hope, continues to have this foot in the past, which embraces people still having farms and cattle and community gardens and the agriculture component, yet realize that as a satellite community to Nashville, that in the future we are a gathering place to not only live, but also to work and to play and to commute into Nashville.
And a balance of how do you pay for all that?
Right.
I know it's been a struggle for Thompson Station City to figure out how do we pay for all these services.
That's right.
You're fortunate, as we've had other conversations with mayors, that you don't have to deal with the aspect of paying for schools. That's a function of county government,
right?
Which I'm sure is a blessing for you. When I interviewed Dr. Ken Moore, the mayor of Franklin, every city has an Achilles heel that is very expensive. Not that it's good, not that it's bad. It is what it is. And for Franklin, it's that public infrastructure, the public services, the law enforcement, it's the fire protection, and that's a very costly item.
That's right.
And of course, they live predominantly on the sales tax from people like you and I eating and shopping, because you just don't have that network in Thompson Station. I don't even know who is your largest sales tax.
I believe it's the Kroger.
The Kroger, which I remember when that was going in, it was a battle. Did they want to be in Thompson Station or did they want to be in Spring Hill?
Right, right.
But sales tax, because we are a sales tax state,
Yes.
we do not tax, and I'm glad we don't, the individual wealth of an individual on a payroll tax like many other states do. We're one of those few that don't, and we're very dependent upon that sales tax and from the state of Tennessee and the money that they shift down in forms of grant, and it's never enough.
That's right.
So it is a balance for you and your legislative body to say, how do we pay for it? How do we maintain? Roads aren't cheap.
True.
Repair of roads is not as costly as new roads, so you pass on so many of those costs to those developers when they decide to come to town, just like we do over on the educational side. We pass on rather than continually taxing the existing residents. But when I look at what Thompson Station's been able to maintain, it's constant trying to figure out, is it more growth, not enough growth? How do we preserve these lands? Because although I don't own hundreds of acres, there are probably some times that I wish I did.
Yes.
But the value of that land to be able to sell it and walk away independently, wealthy, is huge in our town.
It is. It is. So, this discussion about land rights and and versus the folks that want to, if you will, some days want to shut down growth and not allow their neighbor to do with their land what they're allowed to. It's an ongoing tension that we see in our town. I think it's true of Greater Middle Tennessee these days. And so back to this balancing act question. For us, we are trying to be very highly directive about where the commercial goes, and ask the development community to have an honest discussion with us about what that impact could potentially be to our community, both the pros and the cons, and to figure out public-private ways to get the growth to somewhat pay for itself. So we're not looking at raising property taxes or sales taxes. And with our code, what we've done is designate areas that we do not identify for any level of commercial growth or high-density residential. We said, let's put the infrastructure in place along 31, 431, 840, these nodes where we can leverage the infrastructure we will put in, whether it's broadband, whether it's sewer, whether it's water, you name it, the roads, and concentrate it there. Many in the development community, I think, appreciate the fact that it's now pretty well understood what the expectations are. And it wasn't always that case. We kind of had an amalgamation of our code and our ordinances. And several years ago, we came together as a community, got rid of that, and said, okay, we're really going to just start all over. And so we're in the early stages of seeing how this plays out. But back to this question of sales tax growth, what we do have is we still have over 15 square miles of green space. And so we have a canvas to fill in, hopefully in a pragmatic and planful manner that attracts the types of amenities and tax-paying entities that support the dreams and aspirations of all the residents. They want the parks, they want the trailways, they want the places to eat and shop, all those things. And so unlike maybe certain other areas that are reinventing themselves, we start largely with a clean slate, and we know to a large degree where we want folks to invest in our community.
Well, you may have created a conversational piece. I like that. Reinventing Thompson Station in 2019. It's actually started. And when you're in a leadership position, when you're steering the ship and you've got to navigate those waters, whether they're choppy or they're real smooth, comes a lot of criticism. Comes a lot of, okay, I'm gonna take you out of office. I'm gonna run against you, whether it's you or me. Over the years, we've both been challenged at the ballot box, and that's an important process that people that vote need to understand your wisdom, your direction, your type of leadership, and what your council is wanting to do. Because it's so easy for an individual You mentioned it, I got involved because of public schools back in 1986. But you mentioned yourself there was going to be a retirement home right next door to you. And we banded together, a bunch of people, and because you talked more, you became the mayor. That style of leadership is all throughout the state of Tennessee and even here in Williamson County. And each 4 years, you have to stand for what you've done in the past.
Sure.
And predict what you're going to do in the future.
Right.
And there's always those critics, both good and bad, that buy into that. But overall, in the 29 years at Thompsons Station and the direction, because I do remember it was a squeeze point between Spring Hill and Franklin coming right at Thompsons Station. Good and bad about Thompson Station?
Well, where we're located is part of this good and bad question that I'll dive into a little bit more. But when you think about it, Spring Hill shows no signs of really slowing down with its growth trajectory. It's a popular place to live, and companies are investing that down there. Obviously, more good news coming out of GM for that our part of the world. Franklin is a popular place too. We're popular, and interestingly enough, people have choice. We're starting to see people choose Thompson Station that live in Spring Hill or Franklin for a variety of reasons. Moving to Thompson Station because I think they're buying into this vision of a Back to the Future, modern Mayberry kind of vision that we espouse, which is how do you be a progressive, best-in-class small town, but you stick to your roots, right? And you still maintain that.
Do schools help or hurt that vision?
No, they really help. Of course, it's one of those attractants, right? you put in a brand new Williamson County school, and they come,
yes,
and so the good and bad. This you mentioned our tax rate. It's the lowest in the county.
Yes.
And it is by far lower than either Spring Hill or Franklin, just for comparison purposes. They're 3, 4, 5 times what.
Well, Noblesville, I just had an interview with him, was 15 cents.
Yeah, right. And I think he thought he was the lowest, but
He probably did.
yeah. And so back to this thing of a free lunch, we got to pay our way.
Yes.
And I'm not saying we're going to have a tax increase. I'm not saying any of that. What I am saying is that you can't have the trajectory of our growth and not be willing to have an honest discussion about how we're going to pay for the bills.
So what's your budget, approximately, revenue-wise?
Revenue-wise, it's probably call it a $4 million budget, but the cash budget is less than that. What it takes to run the town year in and year out. And you look at our savings, we've done a good job of saving money and socking money away. But as I point out, one big road project, one big sewer project, and you could exhaust your cash reserves. And so we can't be naive to the fact that even though we keep over a year's worth of operating cash and as a rainy day fund in case housing starts were to stop like they did in 2008, give or take. And even though our wastewater fund has built up a nice reserve, we've identified projects that could exhaust all that money and work back in a situation of needing to borrow money. And so for us, back to this revenue model discussion, it's things like wastewater that's been in the headlines a lot. It's something we've been working on a lot. I think any town, Franklin's another good example, you're always working on your wastewater, and certainly with the level of growth. We've got some work to do there. Wastewater repair leads to more confidence of folks investing in your community, whether it's residents or whether it's commercial concerns. So that'll be a big focus area for us in the coming years. Go ahead.
They just gave me the nod that we've got about 4 minutes left, and the sales by, and I can think of so many things that I didn't get to discuss or ask you, but so I'm going to give you an opportunity in the remaining time we've got to touch on some things that are important to you and you as the mayor and or your legislative body that I might have overlooked.
Okay, sure. Wastewater, we'll put that as priority one. There's certain key road improvements, and most of that is in and around the new elementary and middle school on Kreitz Lane. What we'd like to see happen is not only road improvement, also investment in our trailway system so people can walk and bike as well as drive. to and from not only the schools, but over to our parks, and to embrace what people love about the community, which is getting outside. Getting on with our historic downtown streetscape revitalization, a new town hall, frankly, with our growth. We need a better place for community gatherings and for staff to work. It might also free up the train station that we now use as town hall and turn it back into the library that it once was. And so there's things like that. We are working on small things within our parks that are big things. We're putting in the first bathrooms in Preservation Park. That's like
That's a huge thing.
That's a big deal, right? And putting in interpretive signs and so we can tell the Battle of Thompson Station and other ways to share our story. We're working on our website. Again, these are small things, but they're big things. So from a resident service standpoint, as well as a communication piece, our town can do a better job of outreach to the citizens and others just about what's going on in our town. So these are a lot of the fun projects. Thoroughfare planning is another biggie. I can't go buy groceries without somebody stopping me and asking me about, the thoroughfare planning and the corridor stuff and the interchange. And so there's excitement and trepidation both about how that's going to unfold. So.
How does Corey Napier, I'll interrupt you, let you catch your breath, but how do you balance your, being the mayor is full-time work, part-time pay, but you do have a career that you have to balance, and that work, public service life is a little different for me. It's full-time for me.
Right.
And my children are all grown. In fact, I'm a old grandpa now, and I love that. I've got 9 of those little rascals that I love being around my feet and hugging and being involved with. But for you, it's a chore. You got a minute to answer that, and that's all we've got left.
Yeah. Well, you find yourself on a lot of phone calls at night talking to folks and asking for help. I've learned to raise my hand more, certainly as mayor, it's good that I have a network of folks that have been there, like David Coleman and others in our community that step up.
Sound like you got a supportive wife too.
Well, she's very supportive and understanding, and she just tells me to go in the next room if I'm talking town business sort of stuff. It's one of those things. I love our community. I love the potential of our community. I love where we're going, and I'm just that's we all have our hobbies. We all have the things that we're into, and I like to be outdoors. I like to meet people. I enjoy the aspect of solving problems, and so this mayor thing is something that kind of weaves on a lot of those interests.
It is that. Corey Napier is the mayor of Thompsons Station. I've enjoyed our 30 minutes together and finding out more about you and the aspirations. He's a man with a passion. You can still hear it and see it in his eyes and feel it in his bones that he's got that passion. Thanks for being with us. I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County Mayor. See you around at the next time.